let's talk about matcha today. I'm wondering how many of you are you familiar with matcha? Like, not just heard about it, because I think most people have today. It's becoming such a popular drink, but also I'm wondering how many of you have actually tried green tea. And so I want to talk about, hello Magdalena and all, Shannon is saying from Michigan. Awesome. Hi Shannon. Shannon is a regular here. So, I want to give you a little bit, actually from Costa Rica, we've got somebody, Fanny. Hi Fanny, are you new here or have you been watching for a while? So as I'm talking about some of the benefits of matcha, I want to show you, in case you're new to this, I want to show you what it looks like. And it's just this incredibly, I just love that. It's such a fine powder that it's kind of like dust. It's all over the place, gets out really quickly. So let me do a little zoom in so you can see this is basically what it looks like. It's really, really fine powder. I mean, you're talking about, you can't really even hold it and touch it. It would just completely disintegrate in your fingers. So I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of matcha, but also how to prepare it, because one thing I've noticed is a lot of people have no idea how to prepare it and prepare it the wrong way, and then you lose all the medicinal properties of matcha. So let me tell you first about a little bit of a history of matcha tea. It originates from Japan. It used to be served to the monks who were meditating extensively to keep their focus and keeping them alert so they don't fall asleep while meditating. On the other hand, matcha tea, a strong matcha tea, was also given to the warriors who were going out to the war to energize them. And so it's an interesting combination, right? Of you think like, well, on one hand, it energizes us, but on the other hand, it also has this calming effect so that a monk, it's hard to meditate after coffee, right? Because it just really wakes you up and it makes you jittery for some of you, especially if you're not clearing caffeine very effectively. You might be getting quite jittery when you're drinking coffee. So can you imagine meditating or sitting still after having coffee? Impossible. But you can do that with matcha. That's one of the amazing properties behind it. Behind the scenes, what is happening here is that matcha does have caffeine, okay? So if you have a severe adrenal fatigue, you do not want to be drinking matcha, because just a teaspoon of matcha has the same content of caffeine as a shot of espresso, so it's pretty high. However, if you can mitigate the effects of caffeine on your adrenals when you have it after breakfast, especially after breakfast that contains a significant amount of fiber and fats and protein, and that way the caffeine does not give you too much of a sugar spike. You definitely do not want to be drinking caffeine, whether it's a coffee-based or whether it's matcha tea, on an empty stomach, because you're really giving yourself then an adrenal hike, a sugar hike as well, okay? So on one hand, it's got caffeine, so that wakes us up, but not the same way, the way coffee does. So to give you an example, the way matcha energizes us let me talk about coffee first maybe. Coffee gives us that kind of a spike in terms of energy, focus, right? Maybe good mood for some of you, because dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters that coffee actually stimulates. But then after that, there is a significant drop off. So 11 o'clock, you might be feeling tired again. You might be feeling like you need sugar or you need another cup of coffee, right? With matcha, it's very different. The way matcha brings up your energy levels, it goes up, and it not as quickly as coffee, right? It brings up your energy levels and it sustainably keeps it high throughout the day. Well, when I say throughout the day, it depends on how quickly you clear caffeine, but let's say after 3-4 o'clock, then you slowly start feeling off the drop off. So I have never met anybody who gets jittery on matcha tea, unless of course you have too much of it and you have it on an empty stomach, which you shouldn't, right? Now the other compound that's really interesting about matcha, and for those of you who are joining in late, let me just zoom in here so you can see what it looks like, this beautiful green powder. And there is absolutely no coloring in here. It's all natural. And I'll tell you in a second where this comes from. Like, why does it look that way? Does it come caffeine-free blend? Robin is asking, I don't know. To extract caffeine from, I've never come across a matcha that's caffeine-free, to be honest. And even if you do, it will require some chemical manipulation to extract the caffeine. And in a second, when I tell you about how matcha is made, you will understand that it's probably going to be hard to do that. That's why I don't see that. So the interesting, is the coffee equivalent of coffee, or is it only tea? I'm not sure if I understood the question, sorry, and it disappeared. So you have to repeat that question about the tea, coffee, matcha, whoever posted that. So the other compound that's really interesting in the matcha tea is L-theanine. And L-theanine is actually calming agents. For those of you who might be dealing with anxiety, for example, L-theanine is something that's prescribed as a supplement to people with anxiety. So that's one of the phenomenal qualities of matcha tea, is that energizing yet calming effect, which very few foods, in fact I can't think of any food that have two of these properties, like a two-in-one kind of a package. So let me tell you a little bit about the history of matcha. Interestingly, like I mentioned, in Japan originally it was used by the monks as much as it was used by the warriors. But also, if you look at the how it's harvested, is that it's only harvested 2 times a year. Is it 2 times or 1 time a year in Japan, where they pick just the little tiny leaves that are on top of the bush. So you're talking about just really the top quality, and it's just the tip of the buds that just are coming out. That's the reason why the color is so beautiful. It's got that bright green, because those are not the old leaves, that are the young leaves. I like black tea, which is fermented and then dehydrated, right? Green tea, matcha tea, there is no fermentation involved. It just goes straight into drying and then goes into powdering. So, people, for example, with histamine can tolerate this form of tea better than the ones like green tea or black tea, which is fermented, and so because it's there's no fermentation involved here. So those are some of the. Oh yeah, the other thing I want to mention is that, buying matcha. That's another thing. I want to show you in a second how to prepare. So just stay with me. There's one fundamental mistake everybody's making with matcha tea, and I want to address that because you're losing a lot of the nutritional properties. It's one of the highest foods in antioxidant called the ECGC, which is a very potent antioxidant, and the amount that matcha tea contains is higher than the most foods, actually, even higher than most berries. So an all-around really fantastic food. You definitely do not want to have it at night before going to sleep, because that caffeine is going to keep you awake. So if your threshold is at 3 p.m., then do not drink it after 3 p.m. Let me see if there's anything else I forgot. I just bought some of this lovely whiskey with almond. Okay, right. Yeah, so you can whisk it with almond. I'll show you some ways to prepare it and making it into a latte. Although I have to tell you, you may or may not know that I actually grew up in Asia. So I spent most of my life living in Malaysia, but then I moved to Hong Kong and Shanghai. And Shanghai is just an hour-and-a-half flight from Japan. So I used to go to Japan a lot for weekends and skiing and just holidays. And so matcha has been, it's obviously served very frequently, but good quality matcha there's such a variety of different matchas, right? As you can imagine, there's different quality of olive oils, there's different qualities of, you name it, right? Of any kind of food. And it's the same thing goes to matcha. And so I have absolutely no interest whatsoever, no financial benefits. This company doesn't even know that I exist, and I know about them because I love them so much. And the brand that I do recommend is Matcha. It's right here. You can get it on Amazon. Let me do a little zoom in. That's Matcha tea. And the reason why I say this is because, I've lived around Asia long enough to know what's a good matcha and what's a cheap matcha. There are several matchas that are darker in color than this. So take a look again at how bright the color, the green is. And, and I feel like, and we need to see the replay, but I feel like even right now the color is kind of looking a little bit darker than what it is. You want to get a really bright color of matcha. I've seen those darker ones, and I'm not sure what's causing it, and the taste is off as well. And that's not the top quality matcha. If you are hoping to find a cheap matcha, then you're not getting a good quality matcha. You don't need a lot of it to feel satisfied, but you want the same thing with oils. You want to get good quality oils. The same thing with the tea. I've also seen products that say they are matcha tea with tea bags, and with actual tea leaves and then a little bit of the powder sprinkled in the whole box is $12, ain't gonna happen. That should, and then you realize it's actually not really matcha tea. It's actually green leaves, green tea leaves, which is not matcha, is green tea, so that's from the matured leaves. And so that makes a huge difference, right? And on top of that, you never put it in a bag, in a tea bag, into hot water, because it is gonna dissolve. And now I'll show you in a second how that works. So let's get going with, I'm just gonna grab, actually this is already, I just boiled the water, so this is hot water. So let me show you the preparation. Now, having lived in Asia for so many years, you know, the Japanese treat matcha in a very ceremonial way. In fact, matcha tea is prepared in a very ceremonial way in Japan. And so all the things you guys are talking about, like adding the almond milk and this and that and the latte I'm going to show you, there's a part of me that really feels like I'm bastardizing that tea, because that's not the original. It's like if you want to make, you know, I don't know, if you want to make, let's say, a curry with a pasta, you know what I mean? The Italians will be offended. And so the same way, like you know, a lot of my Italian friends will say, like, how can you have a pasta out of a box, right? You're gonna have a freshly made pasta. I mean, so the same way a Japanese person will be cringing looking at what I'm gonna do in the second part of this video. So let's get started. It's really pretty simple. The traditional way of preparing matcha tea is with a whisk and a bowl. My whisk got old and crappy, so I threw it away. So I'm just gonna show you a very practical way. And by the way, I talked about quality. Hey, you guys, this box costs $41 in Whole Foods. Online and Amazon, you can get it for $33, and I'll post the link up there. This is the organic. This is like the most expensive, because organic is the first harvest, right? But that's the price of matcha tea. Apart from the matcha, the other brand I do like is called Teavana. So Teavana. It's now owned by Starbucks. So I met the founder. The tea is really top quality. But as it happens a lot of the time, when big corporate companies buy over small companies, then quality starts going down. So do watch out on that. If you want to try the matcha first to establish your baseline, to know really what is a good matcha, that's the way to go before they get bought over by somebody. Okay, so now we're talking, let's get cooking. So let me do a little zoom in here, show you what I'm doing. It's basically as simple as, you know, per serving, I mean, I would not go more than a teaspoon, because that really is the size of espresso. So, you know, you don't want to be over caffeinating yourself. The first thing okay, so let me just talk about the biggest mistake most people do. And that is pouring hot water straight into the matcha tea. You do not want to do that, okay? And the reason why that is so is because you retain all the properties that I talked about in matcha tea, and there's actually a lot more in terms of vitamin, minerals. It's the ACGC is a phenol. You've got also chlorophyll in here. That's why the beautiful green color. All of those things will get severely compromised when you pour hot water straight into the matcha. So you want to have a warm drink, that's great. So this is what you do, right? Is we start off with adding just a little bit of water. I'm just using an ordinary, you know, jar, right? Just a mason jar. And then what we'll do is what we want to do is dissolve it. So shake it. And the good news is that the matcha tea is going to get completely dissolved, okay? You're not going to be, that's why I said earlier, when somebody says do it with a tea bag, right? I mean, you see those products on the tea shelves with tea bags. I mean, there should be nothing left in a tea bag. So they mix things in, making it cheap, $12, but it's, you know, it's not the real deal, right? So as you can see, so what we got here is matcha that's completely dissolved now. Let me do a little zoom in so you can see. Totally dissolved, right? And frothy, and that's how you want it. Originally, when you do it with a whisk, you want to get the same amount of froth. You can see how much froth I'm getting here, right? Almost a third of it. Now, the temperature, the maximum temperature you want to treat matcha with is 175 Fahrenheit or 80 degrees Celsius if you are from Europe, right? So let's say about 20 to 30%. In fact, depending on who you talk to, a lot of my Japanese friends will say the lower the temperature, the better. And so what we want to do then is, this is still too little water to add cold water to add hot water, right? So what we want to do, so typically what I do is I fill up my glass with about a third. Is there room temperature in the first water? Yes, Stacy's asking. Absolutely. So this is room temperature water that I dissolved the tea matcha in. Good question, thank you. As you can see, I'm about a third, right? Maybe a little bit more with filled in with cold water to room temperature. Not cold water, it's room temperature water, right? And then what we want to do is then only fill it up with hot water. Okay, so that way you have a nice warm drink, like the coffee temperature kind of a drink that's highly drinkable, but you did not destroy all the nutritional properties of matcha tea this way. Does it make sense? Okay, so that's the original matcha tea. That's how you can prepare it. Now, if you feel like, matcha tea does have a little bit, I'll call it an acquired taste. It's not something that it's something you're probably born with, to be, drinking green tea on a regular basis, a matcha tea on a regular basis. But I find it actually more delightful than a green tea because it's not bitter. By the way, I cringe every time. Actually, for green tea, like green tea leaves is the same principle. In Japan, you never see them pouring hot water into this. It's always a water that's about to boil, but it's not boiling yet. And that makes a huge difference because green tea as well as white tea, the way they prepare in China, when they poured hot water on it when it's bitter, right? It's bitter and you go like, I know it because I'm really interested in teas. I actually went and did tea workshops with the Tivana founder in Starbucks office in Seattle because that's how much I love teas. And one of the things that we were experimenting with was we were pouring hot water on tea leaves in one and then way below, so like the 175 Fahrenheit, 80 centigrade in the other, and you can significantly feel the difference in the taste and the bitterness of the tea. So your matcha should never be tasting bitter. If you're going out, tastes bitter, they use hot water. Slightly bitter, because that's the way it is. Very grassy. It's got a strong grassy flavor. And once you get used to it, it's absolutely lovely. So why don't we make a little matcha latte, since we are in the United States and most of you are not maybe used to drinking it plain the way it is right now. Is matcha caffeinated? Maria is asking. Maria, I think you missed my first whole part of the workshop or the presentation. Yes, it is caffeinated, so I talk about it. I talked about a lot of the benefits. And Marla, is it Marla? Okay, Marla. I talked about the benefits of and the properties of matcha, so do watch it from the beginning when I'm done. So why don't we prepare a little latte, since most of you here are not Japanese and maybe you don't really care how the matcha tea should be consumed in its original form. We just want to make it taste good, right? So the thing that I'm gonna be adding in here, you're right that you can make this with almond milk, you can make it with coconut milk, with hemp milk, whatever is the milk of your choice, right? I'm gonna make it, since I already dissolved this, and I tend not to drink these kind of milks because they do they use a lot of preservatives and binders and so I prefer to eat as cleanly as possible. I want to show you, I'm using something called Artisana, which is their coconut butter. I just love Artisana. When is the best time to drink matcha? Between meals or Sadita is asking, no, you just drink it whenever. I mean, it's the same as coffee, right? It's like, when do you drink coffee? Whenever, right? So it doesn't really matter. So the coconut butter is actually kind of cool because it is the pulp of an old coconut that's basically ground up together. And the cool thing is that there is no preservatives in here. In fact, the only ingredients that it contains is just organic coconut, right? And that's one of the reasons why I love Artisana, the brand, not only organic products, but really clean products. And you don't need to preserve it because it's all kind of fat, right? It's different from coconut oil because the pulp is still in here. So you have the fiber, you have the protein, right? Together with the fat. One thing you do not want to do is you do not want to cook with coconut butter as if it was butter, like a cow's butter, right? So the next thing we're gonna do is basically add, and let me just show you also how coconut butter looks. So for those of you who here uses coconut butter, I've been talking about this product for a very long time, but if you're new, maybe this is new to you. So this is what coconut butter would look like. It just has like a consistency of, I don't know of what, I would say, it's kind of hard to say. It's like just real pulp with coconut, you know, coconut pulp with the butter, with some fat. So I'm gonna put in here like a generous tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. Depends on how rich you want it. I feel like having it maybe a little bit rich today. And now, sweetener or no sweetener, absolutely your choice. I just happen to have some honey here. I feel like my immune system needs a little bit of a boost. So I've been babysitting a dog for a friend, but I kind of forgot that I actually have an allergy to dogs and dog fur. So I feel like my immune system is a little bit suppressed from having the dog around, and she's been sleeping in my bed, so that's not helping either. Haha. I need to stop that. So I'm putting in like, what was it, like probably a teaspoon of honey, and I'm using raw honey, which is local honey here in Colorado. You always want to use local honey. It's got these incredible enzymes that really helps you boost your immune system. And that's it, you guys. What I'm gonna do is, I'm using the NutriBullet. So what we're gonna do is just give it a bit of a whirl. I mean, just look at the color. Isn't it beautiful? So who here has been drinking matcha, I'm wondering. And how do you drink it? How do you consume it? You can also add it to your smoothie. So there you have it. A beautiful, beautiful matcha latte with, this one is made with a coconut butter, right? So are you guys inspired by matcha? Just the incredible richness of nutritional properties, the incredible, the really interesting property of energizing you and calming you down both at the same time. I think it's really quite fascinating. Let me give it a try. Yeah, so not too much coconut. I feel like it just gives you this really nice balance of richness, creaminess. It's sweetness, obviously from the honey. I can barely taste the sweetness, but it's more of even out the bitterness of the tea, right? So it looks yummy. Yeah, and it is. That looks so good. I know it is, right? Thank you, Jem Alba is saying. Yeah, so I hope this inspires you for the weekend. Really great way of replacing coffee. If you are a coffee drinker, then I would suggest to switch, because it is a much gentler, energizing drink than coffee would be. And you know, I've written an article about, yeah, somebody's asking about whether matcha would make going to the bathroom. That's a really good question. So the answer is yes, it would. And that's the effect of the caffeine. Caffeine is actually dilutes your veins, right? So this is the reason why, one of the reasons why, so it's a relaxer to some degree. And this is the reason why you go to the bathroom. So with matcha, yes, you would. So give it a try. See what happens. All right, let's see what other questions do we have coming in. I'm curious, what do you guys think? Has this been helpful? Who here is gonna try matcha? I will post the link to the matcha on the video description up above or below. I can't remember. I never remember where Facebook puts it. So I'm sure you can figure it out. And Tivana is the other brand that I recommend. Okay, you guys, I think let's keep this video short for today. Thanks so much for being here with me, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye.